emphasis on disarmament. If that's a very important issue too, obviously it is to everybody. But if one party has obviously a very strong line in one direction and one in the other, which is through all the elections, how do you take that into account?
Well, your Buddha wisdom takes that into account. You see, wisdom is the best way to do something. And there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, in the end, there must be the best way. If you can't reach agreement, what do we say? Well, we better all go off and chant Daimoku for a week, or a fortnight, or a month, and meet again. Until we do all agree, or everyone really is willing to agree to the ways and means of doing or achieving that particular goal. Do you follow? So the same applies to politics. In fact, probably the overall aim is very similar amongst people. What we argue about endlessly is the ways and means. So put that on a collective scale, and you have political parties, all arguing with each other most of the time about ways and means. We all want peace. One says, let's do it unilaterally. Another one says, we can't do it that way. That's ways and means. Peace is the aim, isn't it? So therefore, it doesn't mean to say that we'll be all in the same party because we chant the gongs. Discussion is important. Sensei always says with the married couple, there must be some abrasion, but not too much. A couple that has no abrasion, no rough times, arguments, disagreements, are totally uncreative, useless as a couple. It's the same thing. Some abrasion is essential. And out of that abrasion, people gradually overcome their emotions. They in the end have to listen to others, consider other points of view, and in the end you can reach the ways and means which everyone will support and agree to. That's the way of the Gohonzon. Therefore, that should be the way in which we consider putting our allegiance so far as voting is concerned. Being flexible, being ready to follow what our wisdom tells us through practice. So that is another point, isn't it, to think about. So it's 6:05 now. 2 or 3 minutes. If anyone wants to ask a question, then we should break, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
We'll have a break. Yes, Robert? I knew you were going to put up your hand. Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Because we're all practicing Buddhism, don't you think we ought to all vote socialism? Because I think that goes along with what Buddhist theory about creating the right kind of environment which encourages say, caring or less greedy type atmosphere. And, conservatism is based on capitalism, and that's based on greed. Greed on people's greed. And I can't see myself, there's a choice in it. And I can see that.
But actually, if you think below the surface, or if you look at the thing also from another person's point of view, they may see the 3 poisons at work in socialism just as much as they see it at work in conservatism or STP, liberalism or communism. The 3 poisons are working everywhere because the 3 poisons exist in the people's lives. So probably if you took the pure theories of Karl Marx, for example, it would be reasonably understandable, and it might seem a very reasonable way of life to follow. What the problem is with all isms is that the 3 poisons are at work. There may be good points in either. You may think that way, but there might well be someone else sitting over there who doesn't see it that way at all. But again, ultimately, it's ways and means, isn't it? So what we've got to be clear about is the ultimate aim, really, isn't it? The ultimate aim is to be able to establish a happy, peaceful world in which every human being has the opportunity to live a fulfilled life. That's the overall aim. There's probably not one single politician with any sincerity who wouldn't agree to it. The problem is the ways and means. So it's quite understandable that one person, Robert, may think these ways and means are the best, but equally there may be someone else over here who disagrees. And we can't see the trends of the future with our thinking minds. Maybe a little bit, but not with any great certainty. So what are the ways and means that are best for circumstances which haven't even yet unfolded? That's the point, isn't it? So we really need wisdom. I can't see the future with my thinking mind, but my Buddha state knows the future. So it's the Buddha state that should be the guide. In other words, we should chant Daimoku to know which is the best way to follow at any particular point of time. And at every point of time, everything has changed, including us and our local circumstances, everything. So, of course, Bob, I'm not saying, that you shouldn't always vote. You may well find that when you put it to the Gonzan, you do feel you must vote the same way again. That's fine. But what I'm really getting at is we should have flexible minds. Not be blind, not be rigid, because everything is changing all the time. Someone else?
Do you ever feel that withholding one's vote would be a positive step? Do you feel that there are certain policies of all parties which you disagree with so totally on moral grounds?
Did you all hear? Would it be valid to withhold one's vote under certain circumstances? And I think, as a matter, I'm thinking now, what a pity that question didn't come up with the young women. We didn't cover it. But yes, it could be so. Definitely, it could be so.
Surely that's not taking responsibility.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because it depends on the balance of power, doesn't it, between the parties.
I've never voted because I've never, but I felt like that. I just thought, well, they're all the same.
But that's not right. I mean, what John, I think, is saying, and I certainly would be saying, is you must chant to know who you should vote for. If, you keep on chanting and every time you're in front of the Gonzan you feel you shouldn't place a vote, then don't do it. That's the answer to that.
They have a protest vote, where you can actually vote a white sheet, which cuts down the majority. The person that's in the lead, which is like a protest vote, not for anyone, it's in the lead.
Interesting idea. Yes, it's an interesting idea. Of course, there are many, many ways in which the democratic system can be improved. But the point is that the more people feel responsible, that will happen naturally, won't it? The improvements to the whole system. If it has the weight of a great many people behind it, who are actively desiring to be able to express their point of view, then the improvements to the system will occur too. Yes, Robin?
So say we put this into action, what it was suggested, say we chant within what you said is wise, so therefore we chant about it and then we come out with our right decision. Okay. Now how can we affect other people saying who don't sort of explain to them that they should really look inside their minds in some way? I mean, if they're not going to practice, but do we say to them, you know, have a really good think before you
Yes.
do?
Yes, that would be the best thing.
Right.
But in a way it goes hand in glove, doesn't it, this? With the feeling amongst more and more people that their voices must be heard. That you must use this system if we're really going to have a prosperous, happy country. That we can't just leave things to politicians alone. That they need actually the support or the weight of human opinion behind them. All these things come into it, don't they?
Yeah, I feel that your view of democracy or democracy in this country is quite optimistic in the sense that you're saying that there is a certain power that people have through the vote. There's an old slogan that said, if voting changed anything, it would be abolished. And what I feel in that is that I don't think voting really, it's optimistic and it's giving the person, the individual, a far too important role in actually deciding the affairs of his or her country. And therefore, because people, and politicians are, in a sense, reaffirming that idea that because people are allowed to vote, somehow, you know, we do have a wonderful system and we should continue to keep it going. I believe that idea is incredibly nostalgic in a lot of ways, very outdated. And people, I think there are cases where people don't vote what they think is best. Sometimes there are compromises made. Or vote for that part. I really would like to support this party, but I don't think they've got any chance of getting in because of the rigidity of the system. And therefore, I will vote for this party as a second-rate compromise. But that isn't really voting for sincerely what I believe is going to make people. Or maybe, I mean,
Yes.
what I'm advocating, or what I'm actually asking is, what do you feel about the system of proportional representation, which does...
Well, I don't want to get drawn into that, because that again is ways and means. What is important is that more and more people use their wisdom in voting. If more and more people do so, then they in their turn will inevitably, because of the increasing weight of a feeling of responsibility, then the system also will be refined and modified. That naturally follows. The problem is that so many people are apathetic, or blind, or not voting at all. So I'm talking now about this matter of politics relative to Buddhism. What I'm saying is that we need people who vote with wisdom, and the more people we all shakabuku, the more such people there will be. Equally, there will be others who will listen to the views of those who have the kahons and find them interesting, because often it's a different dimension or a different viewpoint, very fresh. So, that is the point. We want to use the natural wisdom of the people.
Well, every 5 years, rather than...
That's ways and means. No, I'm not necessarily saying that every 5 years is right, but it's ways and means. If more and more people are convinced of their ability to help direct this country, talking about Britain now, to help direct this country into a way which is better for the happiness of everybody, including ourselves, then inevitably, gradually, the system will change to something better. It'll be refined and modified because there are that many more people putting the weight of their opinion behind the need for those changes. And politicians have to listen to the people. Okay? So also, I think we must stop for a break. Voting in itself, of course, has its problems, where people do not have the gonzo. People think, oh, voting is democracy. That's nonsense. It isn't democracy, really, because of the life state of the people who are voting. Someone may be voting in hell, someone else may be voting in hunger, someone else may be voting in anger, someone else in tranquility doesn't even get out of bed to go and vote. So it's not perfect, it's human, but it's not perfect. Obviously, the more people who are chanting to the Gonzan and doing their human revolution, of course, the better. The better, the more influenceful that will have. So anyway, let's have a break now. It's a good point. You can all argue with each other for a bit. And how long for, Robert? 20 minutes?
Can we, now that's 7:15, can we finish it? Because
yes.
20 minutes then.
20. About 20 minutes to get downstairs, have a cup of coffee, talk, and come back. Then again, later, I'm just telling you these stories because they illustrate, in a way, the drama of these terrible happenings. And I was in Karachi, and actually in a small meeting with the Commander-in-Chief of the Pakistan Army. And at that time, as we were sitting at the table discussing future plans, the word came in that the President, the Prime Minister, Liaquat Ali Khan, had been assassinated. And it was an incredible moment. These men, who were all by then in senior positions responsible for the welfare of the new state called Pakistan, and they sat round this table in absolute silence. And then the Commander-in-Chief, I wrote down the words here as I remembered them, he stood up and he said to them all, "This must never, ever happen again. This tendency amongst our people must be eliminated. Otherwise, Pakistanis will be known to the world as barbarians." I never forget that. But this is life, isn't it? When it gets out of control, in the hands of leaders who have no way of controlling their own inner selves, the emotions of the leaders run riot too, and reflect to the people, and this sort of happening, 6 million or so people killed, can actually take place. It's unbelievable and very difficult to even visualize. So again, it comes back to that point that the inner revolution, the reformation of one's inner self, is so crucially important. We have to do shakabuku. We have to think about the future, especially you as young people. You have to carry this determination through from now right through to the end of your lives. So probably, in 30 or 40 years' time, you'll be sitting here instead of me saying the same thing to the young people of those days. We have to carry forward the movement for the human revolution, out of which Causton arises. Wherever you look, we see this extremism going on in the IRA and all the rest of it. The two authors talk a bit more about the abuse of power and authority. And of course, discuss the matter of the way in which power corrupts people, unless they have some solid rock in terms, of course, of a great philosophy and practice which enables you to hold to it within their lives. The only solution is the human revolution. Just to remind us, I'll ask Sandra to read 2 short extracts from the relevant pages on that point.
Toynbee, I agree that the essential evil of power is an innate tendency in human nature, and that we must search for means of mitigating this evil. I believe that the only effective means is the subordination of egoism or greed to altruism or love in the conduct of individuals. In other words, self-mastery is the only way to happiness for the individual and for all humanity. Ikeda. Realizing and putting into practice the means you describe are the major issues facing mankind today. The first essential is basic self-awareness and self-mastery on the part of the individual human being. We must strive to channel our thoughts about all of society in the same direction. A human revolution is needed to produce both individuals and a society in which altruism is the prevailing spirit. To prevent that revolution from resulting in a totalitarianism that would infringe on the dignity of the individual, we must ensure that it is based on a philosophy and a religion that have the power to convince all people. In addition, we must make certain that this philosophy is born of the spontaneous awakening of each person.
Thank you. So this brings another important point, that although shakabuku is so important, we must also always be working to increase our circle of friends and acquaintances who are non-Buddhists, people who, for one reason or another, in terms of their karma, find themselves unable to practice or to be attracted by the idea of practicing. We must open our hearts and be broad-minded and embrace them as well as those who do practice or will practice. So on the Gohonzon there is a character called Fugen. Fugen is representing those people who are non-Buddhists, but who through their understanding of the aims of those who are Buddhist and their agreement with that, act as a form of protection to the whole movement for Kosen Rufu. So we mustn't be narrow-minded. If we belong to a group or a district, in particular neighborhood, in our daimoku we should be chanting for everybody, not just only for shakabuku, but to embrace everyone in that environment. Recently, Sensei said, he sent a message to the French members, because Dr. Yamazaki had been in Japan, and he said, I really want you all to be like lighthouses. And then he explained what he meant, that the lighthouse, the beam of the lighthouse, attracts the attention of others and protects those other people, doesn't it? Keeping them clear of rocks or dangerous channel or whatever it may be. So in the same way, we have to be lighthouses. And through expressing our views and getting on with our beliefs to do what is right in terms of our jobs and careers as well as our activities for shakabuku, we can impress them, make them feel comfortable, make them feel hope for the future. So our cultural movement is particularly important from this point of view. A show like Alice gave people some almost indefinable feeling of hope for the future. Our doctors, our lawyers, nurses, all these groups, the teachers, and many more will grow in the future. These are all very important because they encourage discussion and chanting amongst the members of those particular careers or professions, and inevitably they go out into their daily work and can act as lighthouses through that growing faith and growing understanding of the application of Buddhism to their daily lives. So we have now gradually shaped, still not in full blast action, the necessary movements. The basis or foundation of them is already there in NSUK. And then gradually we can expand on that framework towards the future. So it's exciting. One hasn't any idea, how we shall find ourselves, particularly you, how you'll find yourselves, each of you, in 10 years' time, where you'll be, what you will be doing. what you will have achieved by then, and your dreams and determinations to achieve for the rest of your lives. So, Liz brought up the point about why people accept dictatorships. Yes, it is because they want to be led like sheep. They don't want to have to make decisions. They're frightened of making decisions. They feel they're not equipped to make decisions. But again, through our practice, we can equip ourselves to make right decisions. We prove it individually, therefore we can prove it in a collective sense as well. And through that growing confidence and conviction, we can pass that confidence on to others. So the movement for the SDI, is an incredible movement. Because all over the world, in every country, there are people who are beginning to move down their chosen path of life with a determination to bring about change.
Just ask a question. You're talking a lot about dictatorships and things like that. And because sometimes I have quite a lot of conflict about the fact that I would master the type of relationship. I can understand the sense of teaching, passing on information and things like that. And I can understand that with sensei being sort of a master of the Buddhist faith and passing it on. But then the other half of me says, well, he's not actually elected. SGI is democracy. So sometimes I've sort of all for Buddhism spreading and not being aligned to any political party. But at the same time, the overall sort of impression that SGI makes, sometimes it becomes very kind of concrete. And I just think SGI is a big organisation, and I don't think of it being sort of a range of complete people, different cultures and different things, belonging to the Conservative Party or the Socialist Party or not belonging to any party but doing something else. And I think, are we all becoming SGI, SGI kind of branded on our thoughts?
No, SGI, your SGI is a religion. The only reason for the existence of SGI is the Gonzen. That's the only reason for its existence. It couldn't exist without it. So, relating that to the actuality of the other part of your concern is you won't find that, for example, if members gradually, as some will, move into politics, they're not going to move into one particular party. My own opinion is they'll go into probably all the existing parties. Because that is to do, politics is much concerned with ways and means. So you belong to a district, right? And you're all chanting to the Gonzen. But each one of you has a different purpose in life or mission, and you have a different and unique nature and character. So you all want to achieve the peace in the world through the progress of the human revolution. That you all agree on. But where you may differ is in the ways and means to achieve it. So you have a district planning meeting, and sometimes there may be incredible arguments, because each view is uniquely different. So you all want the one aim, but the way to achieve it will always be divergence of opinion. But of course, through discussion, you can eventually feel what is the best way. So it's the same applies to democracy. If democracy is properly used, there will always be great differences in opinions about ways and means. But in a general sense, the ultimate aim of those who are chanting to the Gonzen will be the same. It's so fundamental, upholding the supreme dignity of life. Every question comes back to that in the end. So each person may feel that they have different ways to achieve it. But in the end, it's the best way which will finally be decided on, the best way in terms of the way the Gohonzon feels best. You understand?
I do. I mean, I understand. I do actually understand that there's still. And I take your point about the fact that SDI is a religion, so therefore it's not. So you wouldn't actually elect a leader of it. But then there are also priests as well. So I mean, President Ikeda is a leader of a lay organisation propagating Buddhism or allowing it to spread. But someone of me feels how much influence do we have over what happens in the organisation?
We entirely influence it, because each person has the Gohonzon. If Sensei proposed something which wasn't right by the Gohonzon, he could never get us to do it, because you have direct access to the Gohonzon in the same way that Sensei does. You know when you're in front of the Gohonzon what is right. So, for example, in a committee in NSUK, and I hope the same would happen in a district or a group, if you can't agree in the end, after all the argument and after chanting Daimoku about the best way to do something, then we would say in NSUK committees, okay, then let's go away, we'll chant about it, and when we meet in a month's time, we'll have another go to see if we can reach agreement. In other words, if something is right by the Gohonzon, provided everyone goes to the Gohonzon, they can each discover what is the best way. That is the way this organization works. You see, you can't discount the existence of the Gohonzon and the fact that everyone has direct access to it. So if someone tried to impose something that was impure or evil or wrong, it couldn't ever work, because people would feel it and see it, and therefore they wouldn't be able to bring themselves to support it. Okay. Anyway, please think about that one. All right. So we've got to press on. We're a little bit over time already, and I think we'll finish in about 5 minutes' time. We've brought up the subject now of the master and disciple. And people, strangely enough, your question was in exact sequence with this. And the question of members, finding members in all political parties. The two authors actually question whether democracy is the best. We tend to think that democracy is just having elections and the right to vote. But actually, an election, voting, isn't perfect either. It would be perfect if everyone who was voting was in the Buddha state. But the people who are voting are in all sorts of different life conditions when they place their vote. Some in a turmoil of anger, others in hell, others in the state of hunger, others in the state of tranquility. They don't even bother to get out of bed to go and lecture and place their vote. So elections are not perfect. We have to realize that. Therefore, it comes back to the same point. The more people are doing their human revolution and placing their votes, and the more people there are who may not be practicing but can see the good sense of those people, the nearer we'll get to a really great democracy. But don't have any delusions about the fatal failings of the democratic system as we have it at the moment. Elections mean in no way that the right decision is going to be reached if the life state of the people is such that it prevents them from doing so. So this leads to the other final point, which is the crucial importance of education. And I think the two, although we'll consider education as a subject on its own, but its place in this talk today is the fact that we have to educate ourselves and encourage others to educate themselves into the workings of human life and the situation in which we find ourselves now and tomorrow and the next day. In other words, as Sensei once put it, we should be educating ourselves and encouraging others to educate themselves throughout our lifetime, to the very end of our lives. And this is a crucially important development, isn't it? Because it is through education that you can feed much more fully those two other ingredients of experience and knowledge into one's Buddha, universal Buddha wisdom, and through that bring out of your life the very greatest and best solutions to every human problem. So this is why also, of course, Sensei has founded the Soka education system in universities and high schools, still only at its very beginning. And I'm sure in due course of time we also will feel the desire or feel that the time is right to start schools in this country which founded on the fantastic philosophy of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism. Definitely that is surely and certainly what will occur. And in that way we can spread, the desire for education by being able to create children and adults who are actually happily, eagerly learning, and what's more, thirsting to learn more. Inevitably that has effect on others who encounter those people. So education is a crucially important part of changing the world. And comes back to that point, though even we haven't got Soka universities or schools yet based on Buddhism, nevertheless we have an increasing number of teachers who are becoming aware of the way to base their actions in education on the Buddha wisdom. And likewise, we ourselves can start now educating ourselves, each day a little. And the more you do it, the more enjoyable it is. I remember Mrs. Ikeda complaining that Sensei sleeps on a futon, on the tatami matting floor, but he always has piles of books all round his mattress. And he wakes up in the middle of the night, maybe he can't sleep or some thought come into his head and he'll start to read. But the piles of books get higher and higher because he reads about 4 or 5 or more books, as it were, all at once. Actually, it's a very interesting thing to try. I tried it, and it's very enjoyable because depending on your mood, you pick up this book or that book. So you can get 5 or 6 books on different subjects from the library. Mind you, it means keeping them out of the library a long time, but you can pick them up as your feelings dictate and read. Books on all sorts of different subjects, and including, of course, novels. I'm not saying they've all got to be heavy works. Novels are very important because you get out of novels current trend, current ways of thinking. So that process of education is crucial to it all. So I'm going to conclude it now just by quoting something that President Ikeda said. Religious movements either bend to the political powers of the state and become impure through supporting them, or are likely to suffer persecution. The Soka Gakkai has always chosen persecution. Please never forget, he said. So this arises from the ultimate point of religion being separated from politics. This was a great struggle that Mr. Toda had. Sensei records it in volume 10 of The Human Revolution, in one part, towards the end of that volume, because Mr. Toda wondered what the best thing was to do, and he chanted about it, he thought about it, he discussed it with Sensei. But in the end, they reached that absolute clear understanding that politics and religion must be kept separate. So even though various members had got together and gone into politics and founded the Komeito Party, shortly after Mr. Toda died, Sensei made his first declaration, followed by 2 or 3 others, that the Komeito Party was an entirely separate thing from the Soka Gakkai. So the people who are leaders in the Komeito Party cannot be leaders in the religious organization, nor can they even attend meetings. They will attend big meetings, but they will never go to discussion meetings or small meetings. Otherwise, of course, they could influence people almost without realizing it. So it's absolutely separate and must be separate. We've seen so much in history where religion has got involved in politics. Some of you may have seen that old film called The Man of 4 Seasons?
Man for 4 Seasons.
Yeah. It was on the other night, and I happened to see it. That was a good example of how religion can be bent by the power and pressure of politics. So the crucial thing, as this quotation says, religious movements either bend to the political powers of the states and become impure through supporting them, or are likely to suffer persecution. The Soka Gakkai has always chosen persecution. It's never bent to the power of the state, and it has never watered down its beliefs and its principles because of political influence. This, he says, is something to please never forget. Please never forget it. It may be that at times in the future we may become unpopular because we will not bend to the establishment or to some other influence, such as trade unions. We don't know. But we must never, ever bend. And as you know, the Gosho makes that very clear when it says that the only thing which can destroy the movement for Causton Rufu is the worms in the bowels of the lion. So, on that note, I'm sorry I can't answer more questions. But if you like to jot them down, we'll try to remember them next time. But it's already 3:20, and I've delayed you 20 minutes. So thank you very much indeed, anyway, for listening. Many thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Last property, anybody? Also, just to remind you, there's Gongyo at 4 is optional at Richmond Centre.
Can I just have your attention for 1 moment? Next month, June, on your original schedule, we're going to have the new century
Did you keep
the
the
quote,
UK?
yes.
first Saturday of June. But as you know, President Ikeda is coming to Europe, and it's possible that there'll be other activities on. So I'd like to propose to you, if you wouldn't mind, moving the next session from the first weekend of June to the 20th of June, Saturday. And before you look and say anything, I'm really sorry, I know it's a family weekend on the 3-month festival, but that's the only time in that month that it's possible to hold a new century degree. Otherwise, there'll be a gap of about 2.5 months through till August. On the 20th, is that all right? Yeah. Okay, so I know some of you may not be able to make it, you've got prior arrangements, but we'll always be able to provide a table for that session anyway. Okay, it'll be here, but it'll be 4 o'clock at Richmond Centre Conference, and then the young women's session starts at 5. All right. Right, thanks very much. Have a safe journey home.
Right.
I can't even think who it is. I can't even think who it is.